Advanced Gradients Using Mesh Fills in CorelDRAW. My name is Marc Bech. I'm the North American Field Marketing Manager based in Austin, Texas, and I'll be your presenter today. With me is also Cecile Brosius. She's a Product Marketing Manager for CorelDRAW, and she will be moderating this session as well as handling questions and logistics. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on our website for future viewing. Please be aware that everyone will be on mute for the entire session, except myself, of course. To ask a question, please use the GoToWebinar console on the right hand of your screen. Simply select the third panel from the bottom of the console and click the plus sign to reveal the questions window. Then click in the questions field. We'll answer as many questions as possible during the webinar and at the end. And because CorelDRAW is such a full featured application, I'd like to ask that we keep the questions for this webinar to the mesh gradient feature. So without further delay, let's get started. So again, I mentioned before, this training webinar will guide you through the process of creating, using CorelDRAW's Mesh Fill tool to add smooth, artistic, and striking multicolored gradients. In fact, you've seen a few of the examples here. I'll keep that running for just a second here. The Mesh Fill tool is a unique tool that makes it easy to add multiple gradients to the inside of a vector object. These gradients can have multiple color patches and also be used in multiple different directions and locations. You can create smooth color transitions without having to create blends or contours. When you apply a mesh fill, you specify the number of columns and rows in a grid. And after you've created a mesh grid, you can then edit it by easily adding, moving, and removing nodes or intersections. You can, of course, also remove the mesh itself at any time. A mesh fill can only be applied to closed vector objects or a single path. You can add color to a patch inside a mesh fill and to the individual intersection nodes. The gradient will then spread out from those areas or points depending on the locations of nodes and lines around it. Moving intersection nodes allows you to adjust the progression of colors. In addition, you can smooth the color in a mesh fill to reduce the appearance of hard edges. You can also apply transparency to the mesh fill to reveal objects underneath. So let's start by creating a rather simple mesh fill. Let me jump over into CorelDRAW, and I've already opened a simple vector object of an apple that I've actually taken the liberty of adding just a couple of small mesh fills tools to. Mesh fills 2, thank you. I want to add a realistic mesh fill that also shows a light source shining off of it from the upper right area. Let's see how we can do that. So let's start first by adding some mesh grid lines. I know that I want to simulate a light coming from this upper right area, therefore I'd like to have a lighter, almost white highlight where that reflection would be. First, I'll select the main part of the apple with the pick tool, or the arrow tool up here on the top of the toolbar. Then select the Mesh Fill tool, which is at the very bottom of the toolbar on the left here. It might be also under the interactive fill if you can't see it, obviously. You can also just press the M key on your keyboard to select it. And via the settings, notice we have a property bar up here that shows settings for the mesh fill. So via the settings in the mesh fills property bar, it has already divided the object into 2 horizontal and 2 vertical mesh sections, as you see here. We can add or subtract from this at will, which we'll do soon. But I want you to notice that the grid lines rather follow the curve of the apple. So they're not necessarily actual straight across, straight up and down grid lines like you might expect from a normal grid. And once you create a grid, you can start adding colors to either the spaces between the grid lines or onto the point nodes themselves. So now if you look over at my color palette, I only have one red color. I will definitely want and need more reds if I want to simulate the various shades required to make the apple more photorealistic. And I can access a lot more shades of green simply by holding my mouse down on the red color chip. And the collection of red tints will open and display like this. And once it's open, I can choose any of these tints and drag those over and drop them onto the mesh. So now I'll start adding the shades of red to my apple. So I'm going to start in the lower left-hand corner with a very dark red. So I'll grab the one in the lower left corner, lower right corner of the tints and just grab it and drop it in the lower left mesh grid. And as you can see, it actually spreads out beyond this quadrant in a graduated from bright red to no red at all to the next grid lines. And another way to add color is to actually select the node or the grid area itself by leaving a little point there and then go grab a color again. So I'll open up the tint and I'll grab the next darkest red and drop that right in. Or actually I don't need to do that, I can just click on it. That's what I wanted to show anyway. Select it and there we go. So there's several ways to do many of the different tasks here in the CorelDRAW Mesh Fill tool. Notice again that by adding colors not only fills that space with color, but it gradually blends away using the available spaces around it. And the distance of the blend beyond each blend quadrant is dependent on the distance to the next mesh line. Therefore, it can sometimes be helpful if you plan ahead and set up your grid system before adding color. So let me go ahead and add the other two colors. And I'm going to leave the upper right quadrant the way it is. It actually has just the right amount of red, and it already starts to give me the white reflection I already need. So we'll keep that as is. Now, there are at least 3 ways to add or subtract additional grid lines. The first way is through the property bar. So I'm going to up the vertical grid line by 1. And another way is to click a spot on the apple and also to click a spot on the apple and then right-click, or excuse me, let's not do that. Let's do the right-click later. I'll click a point on the apple that I want to add an intersection, and then up here I will say Add Intersection. So that's another way. The third way is to actually double-click on anywhere in the apple that you want to add an intersection. So I'll add one about there, and that also adds an intersection. Doing it these first ways, though, of course, adds both a horizontal and a vertical line. And double-clicking again will delete the intersections. So double-click it again, and it deletes it. But notice when I do so, if I keep deleting, my mesh fill obviously changes properties. And that the white or the red, white advances or the red, I would say, retracts from the area. So that is indicative of how these mesh intersection lines work. So let me go back to where I was, adding the grid lines again. There we go. So as you can see, you can add and delete grid lines anytime, but it will affect your mesh grid. So again, you can use I can also add and delete grid lines via the right mouse click option. So I will go ahead and do right mouse click, click a point, right mouse click, add intersection, delete, etc. I can also do the same thing by clicking on a node, right mouse click, and then delete that particular node. So again, there are several ways to do it, and they're all very, very handy. Now, one thing I'll notice, actually I think I'll mention this later. Let me go ahead, I think I've added all the different lines I want to add. So we're getting pretty close here. All these lines, because they are a vector here, let me zoom in just a little bit here by hitting the F4 key. That will zoom to all my objects. That should be a little easier for you. I can move any node and any line simply by grabbing it, and that's what I'll do here. So I want to extend the white area down a little bit farther, and that's exactly what that does there. Now, you don't have to actually have a node to grab and edit a line. You have the actual control points here, just like you would with regular vector lines. So this allows a great a great precision level that you might not find in other mesh tools. You can also select multiple nodes, and you can have an option on how you want to do this. On the left part of the property bar up on the top here, we have a selection mode. There's a rectangular and a freehand. So if the nodes aren't in a straight line, you can use the freehand like so. So I want to use a freehand and select, say, these nodes on the top here. I would do so by doing that, and then it selects those lines. And of course, you can imagine how the rectangular works. It just does rectangular selections like so. Okay, so we've already shown about how you can blend by adding another line and adding color into the new quadrant. You can also push a color back the same way by deleting a line. And of course, you always have the invariable undo choices as well. So if I click on this, again, if I delete it, everything gets readjusted, but let me bring it back because I really need that. As you can see how it affects the mesh grids themselves. Okay, let's now add some finer color points. So I'm going to use selection tools to select the nodes, and then with 2 white nodes and 2 outer ones. So I'm going to select this node, use the Shift key and select this node, and I'm going to choose white. And then what I would like to do is I want to return these to red. So I'm going to grab that freehand selection tool again and make sure these are all representative of red. And click the red, like so. Very good. Oops, you know what? I may want to do these as well. So I'll Shift select and click red up there. There we go. So now we're getting that white reflection we were trying to get to in the first place. And as a final touch, what I will do is I will make the color gradation smoother between each other by clicking the smooth, let's see, where was it here? Smooth mesh color. Oops, that was actually already on. So let me turn it off, and then you can see the difference when I turn it on. It will actually make it a little bit smoother. It's kind of more of a personal taste. You might like it this way, or you might like it that way. To me, that kind of makes it a little harsher. So I'm going to actually deselect it and keep it that way. Okay, so let me go back to Pick tool. You know what? I don't like it. It actually is harsher. Let's go back. Let's hit the M key again, select it, and let's turn on the smooth. There actually is a lot smoother. So there we go. So so again, clicking it is usually a toggle. So clicking again returns it to where it was. So if I would say on my mesh tool by clicking the M, and I wanted to see the final touches, I can hit the space bar, and it goes back to my Pick tool. Hit the space bar again, and it goes back to the previous tool I was using, which in this case is the Gradient Mesh Fill tool. Okay, so I think we're done showing the apple. We're going to do a couple more things later with this, but I'm going to keep it around. Okay, now what I would like to show you how to do is how to do copying a mesh fill. Oftentimes you'll have a situation where you want a symmetrical design using mesh fills, and CorelDRAW's mesh fill feature is a great tool that will make a copy of a design. You can then apply that design to other areas that you want to contain the same lighting and color effect. Let me show you how this works. Zoom in here. So I have a lotus flower in the vector format. So remember, you can't do this to a bitmap as it needs to know where those boundaries of each object are. And bitmaps really don't have boundaries since they're just a bunch of colored pixels. For the record, all the images I'm using in this training were free bitmaps I found on the internet. I brought them into CorelDRAW, and then I used the Power Trace feature to convert them into vectors. Okay, I'll start by selecting the middle petal with the Pick tool and choosing the Mesh Fill tool again. It already gives me the desired pattern, but remember, I can still adjust any of the node point locations. So I'm going to bump this up to a 3x3, like so. I might need to adjust some of the grid lines and nodes, so let me adjust some of these nodes right here. one of the things you might notice is that I am adjusting all these nodes with the Mesh Fill tool. If you're using Illustrator, they have about, gosh, I can't remember, 4 to 6 different node adjustment tools. There's moving straight lines, moving curved lines, moving nodes, adding nodes, delete nodes. Each one of those has a separate tool. So normally if you're working in Illustrator, you'd actually have to go back to the pick tool every time you wanted to adjust a node here. So this is a great advantage of using the Mesh Fill tool in CorelDRAW. Okay, so this is good enough for now. Let's add some color. I'm going to start with adding a shade of pink in the center. And let's see, there's my pink right there, so I'll just drop it right there in the center, and we're off to a good start. Now I'm going to add some color around the edges using a periwinkle color. So I'm going to go back to my freehand tool here, and I'm going to select all the outer nodes except for the top 2. So wish me luck here. I think that did it. So now let's choose the periwinkle color, which is, let's see, this one right here. And there we go. Hey, I did it. First time. Excellent. So this keeps the top nodes white, which are actually already white, so I don't really need to add color to them, but I could if I wanted to. Let's go ahead and just to make sure those are the right white colors I want, so I'll select them, click white, and yeah, it didn't make any difference, but we kind of knew that. So now that I've created a nice mesh fill, let's go back to spacebar, go back to our pick tool. So that's a nice little mesh fill on that one particular petal. Hit spacebar again to return to the mesh fill tool. I'm going to make my life a whole lot easier by applying this pattern to all the other petals. And that's what the Copy Mesh Fill tool will do for us. Simply click on the object I want to apply the copy to. Excuse me, let me click the Mesh Fill tool first. No, back over here. Here we go. Click the Copy Mesh Fill tool. Then with the arrow, click the one you want to apply it to. Oops. Why did I do that wrong? Click on the Mesh Fill tool, click on the petal, then go to the Copy Mesh Fill tool. And I want to apply the copy from this one. There we go. So my apologies. So let's do that again. Click the petal, click the Copy Mesh Fill tool, and click the petal you want to copy it from. There we are. And you can just keep on doing that all the way around. So let's go ahead and do that. And there we go. So back to spacebar, and there we are. So that, obviously, as you can see, is very, very quick. Now, of course, you still might want to make some adjustments here, which, of course, you certainly can do. Some of the quadrants, again, need some adjustment, like we see here. There's a little cutoff here. The best tip is to actually add up the grid lines. So let me adjust some of these. Let's try this one here. And let's go to a 4x4 and see if that makes a big difference. And it actually does. So let's do that to a few of the other ones too, the most obvious ones. And of course you can come in and move the grid lines around. Want it more white up here. And you get the idea. You can also, of course, smooth a bunch of these out, which we're already doing, so we're good on that. And just after, if you want to take a few minutes to adjust them, this is what it would look like at the end. And really this took like maybe an additional 5 minutes for me. And this is what it'll look like in the end. So it really doesn't take a whole lot of time to make it look really nice. But as you can see, the Copy Mesh Fill tool is a huge time saver. All right, let's move on to another cool method of creating mesh fills. A great way to create the colors you would like to use in the mesh fill is to have all the colors you need in one palette, right? And so, of course, CorelDRAW has many built-in palettes to choose from. So if I were to go to Window, Color Palettes, And these are the color palettes that are available to me, or I can go to More Palettes, and it's opening them up. And over on the right-hand side here, you can see the multitude of different color palettes that I have in many different categories. These are all come built in with CorelDRAW. Spot colors, process colors, Pantones, you name it. They're all in there. So I want to make sure I can let's see, go back to the default palette, which I'm already on over here, so that's not a problem. But what if a palette doesn't have all the colors you need? What if I could show you how to avoid going between multiple palettes to get the colors you want? Accessing color tints is an awesomely helpful feature in Draw. Remember, hold the mouse down on any color and move over and click a color. You can also drag the color as well, as you can see here. That's very helpful. But what if that's not enough? Well, this is where Draw's feature of creating custom color palettes can come in very handy. And let me show you how this works. Let's go to a new file. And let's go to inches, 8.5 by 11. And I think I will go to a landscape view. So there's actually, you can create your own custom palette using a couple different ways. You can make one from an existing image, even a photograph, or create one completely from scratch using any two colors as a base. Let's try the first choice of using an existing image first. So I'm going to import a photograph. Let's see here, the lily. Here we are. So I will drag it out to the area I want it to be. I'll move it down to here. So these would be colors that would be great for, say, a sunset. Creating other flowers. You got the yellows and the reds and the oranges in there. So I just happen to have a photo. Very helpful, right? So let me show you how to create a custom palette from this. So as you can see, you don't want to open the photograph because then you wouldn't have another work area to work in. I had to import it, which is fine because I want a place where I can have room to work this feature and just use a photo as a reference. So what I need to do first is to create two small containers of any shape, and I'll just use the rectangle tool. And I want these to hold the two base or end colors of my color palette. Now I'll grab my eyedropper tool down here, and I'm going to click on a yellow, or what I think is the brightest color in here, and drop this color into one of the rectangles. Then I'll do the same thing for the darkest red I can find. That's pretty good, and we'll drop that one in the second one. So I bet you kind of maybe have an idea what I might be doing here. So back to the pick tool, I'm going to shift select both of these objects and remove the outline around them by right-clicking on the X chip in my color palette. I need to move my GoToMeeting webinar part. Okay, so if I right-click on it, on the X up here, it will delete the outline. And if I right-click on any color, if I left-click on any color, it will delete the fill or change the fill to that color. So right-click affects the outline, left-click affects the fill. Just a little tip there. And then I'm going to choose under the effects menu, I'm going to bring up the blend tool, or the blend menu, palette I should say. I'm going to increase the steps to about 200, and then I'm going to click apply. And there we go. First, you'll notice on the bottom part of my window, I hope you can see all the way down here, it denotes this object now as a blend group on one layer. So we need to break that blend apart so it gives me all the colors I need. So I'm going to go to the Arrange menu and choose Break Blend Group Apart. And now if I deselect it and select it again, You notice the bottom of my screen now says a group of 200 objects on layer 1. So now to convert this to a color palette, we'll simply go to the Window menu, Color Palettes, Create Color Palette from Selection. And we can name our color palette. We'll just do a Sunset Palette. And it goes into My Palettes, which is actually a folder inside your My Documents folder. And as a result, we now have a new color palette over here on the right. So I'm going to actually pull it out so we can see it better. There we are. It now has the range of colors that I might be expected to be using in one of my mesh fill gradients. I can keep it on the right, pull it out as its own window, or even dock it under the property bar, like so. I can also use the flyout on the property bar on the left to tell it how many rows I would like. Let's make it 2 rows. That way I get to see all my colors. Great. So the other way to create a color palette is to, of course, just fill those 2 original objects with any color from any existing color palette. And then, of course, you would just continue following the same steps I just used with the image. So there you know how to create 2 different kinds of color palettes. Okay, I can also just select the image, go to Window, Color Palettes, and choose Create Color Palette from that selection. And it will make a color palette from all the colors in this image. And let's make that one 200 as well. And now we have another color palette. Of course, this includes all the colors, including the greens. So there's lots of different choices. So hope that helps you out. It will really help you out, again, if you want to make a mesh fill that has a lot of very similar colors. This is a great way to create a color palette that's very, very handy. All right, the maximum number of colors in this particular color palette is 255, just to let you know. So, all right, let me give you an idea. With something you might actually want to be able to create, an example, using a mesh fill, using a custom color palette. So I actually used these colors from a different color palette. And actually that was, again, originally a line drawing that I got off the internet. And I used the mesh fill tool after creating a custom color palette with just the colors I needed. Okay, let's see here. We're actually moving along quite well. One last feature of mesh fills I want to show you, and that's the transparency ability. Even though it may not be a realistic feature, let's go back to my apple. Let's add transparency to the apple's leaf. So let me return to the apple file. And let's see, what I'm going to first do, I'm going to send this, I don't need this color palette anymore. I'm going to send this apple to the back. And that is under Arrange, Order, to the back of the page. Now the stem now comes to the front. So you can make some mesh. Transparency will just select these nodes here. There we are. And let's see, under transparency, simply use a slider up here in the property bar, set to 50%. So that's one option. You can, of course, select the entire mesh grid. Oops, M, there we go, and do the same thing. Let's see here, grab it all. Let's see, grab all the mesh points. There we are. And then it's just adjust the entire leaf. So again, it doesn't look realistic, but you can see how that works, and it can really create some very nice effects. It's great for transparent wings for an angel or a bug, or just looking through the looking through the top of a stream where the water above is a little bit transparent. You can see things, the rocks and the different colors underneath the top of the stream. So those are just different choices. Okay, one last thing I'm going to show you, and this is actually a very cool finished feature, finished mesh fill. Oops, let's go to open. Hummingbird. You may have seen this in a little slideshow I showed at the very beginning. This is actually done by one of our international design winners for CorelDRAW, and you can see here the amazing detail in this hummingbird especially, but also in the rest of it. So just for the heck of it, let me show you what it's going to look like under the wireframe mode. So as you can see, the basic object is really kind of simple, and it's really all, the rest of it's just done with the mesh fills. So let's go back to normal view, and let's grab the zoom tool. Let's click in once to the, here we go, space bar down, and A for the hand, oops, H for hand. You are there. You select the mesh fill tool, and you click on the bird itself. So you can see all the different mesh lines here. Oops, you know what? I'm getting a redraw issue. Let me minimize this and come back. That's better. So amazing stuff here. I can select the wing too, and look at that. Look at all the different mesh lines. So you can see the detail and to what degree you can really go crazy with these mesh fill gradients. Let's go back over to here. I'm going to grab my freehand selection tool again, and let's click on, let's see, these three nodes here. You know what? No, I think I'll do a couple more different ones. Oops. Didn't want to do that. All right. Hang on a second here. Select the whole entire object. There we go. Getting back to where I was. There we go. Okay, mesh fill. Bird. There we go. I want to select these three. I think it'll be a little more evident. So again, just to show you how easy it is to edit one of these, let's go ahead and change the color to red. And now you have a ruby-throated hummingbird. So those really are the basics of creating advanced gradients with mesh fill tool. So again, just to reiterate, you have a method of setting how many grid lines and grid points, smoothing out the mesh fill, copying the mesh fill, making the mesh fill transparent. Clicking any point with the mesh fill will add or delete mesh fill lines and nodes. Use the right mouse click to access a lot of the options choices from a menu without having to go to actual tools itself. All your edits can be done using the mesh fill tool without having to go to other tools such as the pick tool or the line or the node pick tool or the line adjustment tool like you would in other applications. And so I think that's really about it. I think we can open it up to, now I'm going to turn over to Cecile, and she's going to pass along a few of the questions that have been posed during the webinar. So Cecile, anytime you're ready, fire away. What do you have for us?
Yes, thank you, Marc. So I just would like to let everybody know that the recorded session will be available in a few hours on the same GoToWebinar link you have used to register for this webinar, or it will be also available on corel.com/webinars in a couple of days. So one of the questions is how many of these features are X5 only? How long could one apply transparency to mesh fills?
How many features are X5? That's something I don't know. I believe this feature was introduced several versions ago. As far as I know, these are all the features that have been in the mesh fill for as long as it's been around. but I'm not positive. You would have, if you have an older version, you would have to go in and take a look at yourself. I'm not familiar with the older versions off the top of my head. And what was the second part of that question?
How long could one apply transparency to mesh fields?
How long can one apply transparency to mesh fills?
Yeah.
How long? I don't quite understand that part of the question.
Okay.
What do you mean by how long?
Yeah, so let me perhaps go back to Kim in order perhaps to have a little more details about the second part of his question.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, you could apply it to the entire mesh fill object, or you can select individual nodes to apply it to that. And the transparency works the same way as does a mesh fill, by it graduates itself between the mesh lines.
Okay. Okay. Another question is, can a vector object be too complex for the mesh fill tools?
Well, you saw with the hummingbird. Well, actually, you know, as long as what it would do, the mesh fill tool will select an entire vector object. So if you want to group mesh objects or group objects together, as long as you group them, they become one. You should be able to apply that to or select that as one mesh fill object. It can handle any complexities. The thing that you might want to, I mean, you saw some of those some of the artwork at the very beginning. They were very, very complex. And I think the suggestion would be to zoom in as far as you can to see that particular object or part of the object that you want to become a mesh fill. It's a very complex object. It doesn't look as complex once you zoom in a lot, and then just select that object with the mesh fill tool and go to work. The complexity of the vector tool should not make any difference whatsoever.
Okay. Great. Just a side note, we have Ariel on the attending the webinar. I know you can't talk, Ariel, but hello from the whole CorelDRAW team, and also thank you for this great artwork that you have sent to Corel that we are using a lot because everybody love it, and that Marc has loved and used for his webinar. So hello, Ariel. So let's go back to the questions. Another question, somebody would like to show the users how to use the eyedropper tool for sampling and filling a mesh object.
Okay, let's see here. Let me go back to the Apple. So you want to say use the, okay, so if I were to say grab this as a mesh tool, mesh object, and perhaps use the eyedropper to fill in. Yeah, it really doesn't work. You would have to actually use it from a color palette. So you would have to add a particular color to a color palette, which is my understanding. So if I pick up this color, and let me see here if I can go there, and if I can go there, and now, let's see. Let me try it one more time. Let's see, bucket tool. Fill. Yeah, you can't use the eyedropper to pick up a color. You have to actually make it some kind of add it to a particular color palette, it seems. I can check into that, but from just my particular trying out here, pick up a color, and you can't really add it to an object, and the object is not really selected anyway. So if I come here, let's see, select that one. Let's see. Yeah, see, it doesn't. A mesh fill object is selected differently than a normal object. So I keep on trying here. I selected the color, and let's see here. Yeah, I wonder if I can do something like this. Select here. Let's grab that. Yeah, see, it wants to deselect the objects every time. So if I were to have, say, two triangles, here's two objects here, and let's see, grab that. So grab that color. Yes. See, it works with a regular object, but not with a mesh object. So there would be your answer.
Thank you, Marc.
Good question.
Yeah, excellent question. Another one. Are mesh fields maintained when exported to EPS, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Oh, will it export to EPS?
Well, are the mesh fields maintained when they're exporting to EPS?
Well, let's take a look. And I will go to the desktop. And let's see here. I'm just going to go with the defaults and see what happens. Hopefully it won't take too long. Okay, there we go. Not sure what it will launch in. Let's see, what can I launch it in? Let me bring it back, see if I can bring it back into Draw. Just thinking about it. It's probably a pretty complex object for an EPS, but we're going to find out. While this is working on it, let's get another question.
Yes. When copying the mesh fill, can you select more than one area to copy to?
No, you can't.
Okay.
No, I'm afraid not. I tried that as well. And there's our EPS object. So yes, it did export as an EPS.
Excellent. Thank you for the demonstration, the online demonstration.
Sometimes you never know until you try it.
Exactly. Another good question. What do you recommend to draw a human face or skin? To use the mesh fill or to make different shape with different color shades?
Right, right. You know, a lot of people will use both. Some people will use blends. Some people use the mesh fill. It really is personal preference on what you're kind of used to. I think that is really a tough question. I mean, you can do it with both. You can do blends. You can do mesh fills. I think the mesh fills are a little bit easier because you don't have to designate. Well, then again, it might not, because maybe you want more control over the blend steps, which is what the blends will give you. Whereas the mesh fill does not give you control over the blend steps. Instead of using blend steps, it uses the intersection lines to control how far the blend goes and to what degree. So that's a tough question. That's more of a personal preference question if you ask me. Oh, one more thing on the EPS. It will not export the transparency part of the mesh fill, as you can see here.
Yeah.
I thought I'd mention that. But really, I think the other questions really has to be a personal preference. I would imagine there are people that do both.
Okay.
But then again, if you try the mesh fill tool, you might find it's the next, the best thing since sliced bread.
Okay. Thank you, Marc. Another question. So let me recheck, go back. How does the mesh react if you use the twist tool?
Oh boy. You would have to ask something like that. I have no idea.
Okay.
Let me give it a try. Let's try this one here. Let's see. Is that under the twist tool? I'm not sure where the twist tool is. Come to think of it. Effects. Wait a second. I think it's over here somewhere. Extrude, envelope, distort. I'll try the distort one and see what happens. Yeah, see, I don't know if I can even select it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't seem to even select it, so let's try one more time. Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting the Ghostbusters sign there. You can't do anything with the vector with that particular tool, so it doesn't look like you can. So twist it first, then add the mesh gradient.
Okay. Excellent. I have a couple of tips for somebody who is attending the webinar or looks to be very advanced in the mesh fill tools. So one of the tips is you can copy mesh properties to multiply object by using the Ctrl+R key.
I'll be darned. Let's give it a try.
So I repeat, you can copy mesh properties to multiply object by using the Control plus R key.
Control plus R key. Let's see. So if I do Control R, boy, I would love to see how that one works. Control R. Let's see.
Control
here.
plus R key. Yeah.
Control plus R. Right. Oops, not what I wanted. Let's see. Apply to.
Oh, sorry. It just sent him. He mean not from the toolbar, but from the right-click, drag.
Ah, okay.
Copy field, then Control plus R.
Okay, obviously I'm not doing something right. I'm not even getting a right mouse click.
Yeah.
Hang on a second here.
So not from the toolbar, Control, right-click.
Right, Control right click.
Yeah, right-click, drag on copy field.
Huh. Control. Yeah, I'm not getting that particular choice.
Okay.
So my apologies, I can't mimic that, but I would love to see that work.
Okay.
I just wasn't aware of that one.
Okay.
But that person's right. There are so many shortcuts in CorelDRAW. It's just mind-boggling.
Okay. Let's move to another question. How can you show, can you show how smoothing edges within an object?
Oh, within a mesh object? Sure. Let me select one of these and then deselect it. And it's kind of hard to see in that one. Let me try and go back to the Apple one. That one's a little more evident. Let me turn this off. And so you can see here how you almost get like a little star effect on the top and the bottom, because it's a little harsh where it follows the intersection lines. So if I were to turn this smoothing on again and then deselect it, you can see those particular harsh lines are no longer there. So that is the big difference by smoothing them out.
Okay.
Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't, but you have a choice.
Okay.
Was that what the question was about, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Is it possible to take textures within a mesh?
No, because a texture is a bitmap object, and you can only work with vector objects.
Okay. Okay. After I have
unless you converted that texture somehow into a vector object.
Okay.
You know, have to be a lot of outlines. What you could do, I'm thinking, is save that texture as a bitmap, bring it back in, do a Corel trace on it, which you convert it to vectors, and then you should be able to use that as a mesh fill pattern. Roundabout way to do it, but it can be done.
Okay. Let me check if we have some other. So I have many questions regarding how often are the webinars and how they are available. So usually we organize one webinar per month. On all the upcoming webinars or the recorded session of the past webinars are available on Corel.com /webinars. You can go also on Corel.com/CorelDRAW, and you go under the resources page and you will see also the list of the upcoming and past webinars.
Cecile, you also advertise the Corel webinars on the CorelDRAW Facebook page.
Exactly. So they are all advertised. Thank you for that, Marc. So they are all advertised on CorelDRAW Facebook page, on CorelDRAW Twitter page, and also on the community site on CorelDRAW.com. So usually we start advertising 2 weeks before, and we send a reminder just before the webinar. If I look at the list of questions, so I'm going to give like 2 more minutes to people. Like if you have any additional question, we have 8 more minutes, so we can still take some question. If you'd like to send me your question.
And please let people know that if we can't answer their questions here, and if I don't know the answer, I'm more than happy to get back to them because I want to know as well.
Yeah.
I especially want to know how the copy mesh fill to multiple objects works. I'm going to find that out too.
So I have another question from Ariel. Why you don't use the document palette?
Why didn't I choose the document palette?
Yep.
Let's see here. Like the, I don't know.
Okay.
Why didn't I choose the document palette? I don't know. Trying to find out where the document palette is. I don't know. I didn't. If there's an advantage to it, definitely tell me.
Okay.
Which I'm sure there is, since he knows about it.
So I may give you the contact of somebody who gave you different tips. So I will do
Sure.
it offline.
Sure.
Is it better to export to TIFF or JPEG? That export to EPS for large format printing.
Oh, I don't think it. I mean, it would. Well, probably TIFF because I think it's a much less compression than a JPEG.
Okay.
Would be my guess, and of course it depends on for what purpose. For printing, I would imagine the TIFF would be much more preferable than a JPEG would. If you're taking this into a service bureau, they might prefer a TIFF over a JPEG.
Okay. So, what do we have? So, export to EPS is not advisable, says something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it does work.
Okay.
But it depends on what you're trying to use it for, I suppose. I don't know how editable it would be afterwards.
Okay.
If at all. Probably isn't. In fact, I'm sure it's not.
Okay. Well, I think we are almost there. I don't see any additional question. One quick question. Somebody would like to know, it might not be directly related to mesh fill, but I think you may be able to give him a feedback. Can you save your color palettes in a folder on your computer?
Yes, they actually are. They are automatically saved in a folder on your computer. They're saved into your My Palettes folder, which is in your My Documents folder.
Okay.
So let me show you. My Palettes. I'm in My Documents, My Palettes, and there's the two palettes I just created. Is that what they were looking for?
I guess so.
You can save it, of course, anywhere you want to, but that's where that's the default location.
Okay. Well, I guess that we have no more question here, so I think we may be able to close the webinar. So, well, thank you, of course, everybody. Thank you very much, Marc, for your time. You may perhaps give the final word to everybody.
Hey, I'm always willing to learn some more, so if anybody knows some tips or something, you can, do you want to hand out my email address, or is there a way for them to contact us with tips and tricks? I'd love to know them.
Well, yeah, there is a generic address.
I'm just an average CorelDRAW user, so I'm always looking for new things as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, there is, so I can send to everybody, let me send via the GoTo webinar. So the address is CorelDRAW@corel.com. And if you have any tips, if you want us to put you in contact with Marc, just use the address I've just sent you through the GoToWebinar panel, and I will make sure that we are giving you some feedback.
And if you have questions that we didn't answer today, I'm happy to address those as well.
Okay.
I will ask the professionals even.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Marc.
Thank you, Cecile. Nice to meet everybody, and have a great, happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah.
Darn, why didn't I make a heart instead of an apple? I just thought of that.
Yeah, well.
Oh,
well. Love has started with an apple.
Yes, that was close.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Thank you, Cecile. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.